Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This audio uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the whimsical world of Lewis Carroll's
Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. Two absolute classics. We've had some fascinating sources to unpack, including the 1897 edition of the book itself, which also has some additional letters and pamphlets from Carroll.
Right.
Get ready for a journey down the rabbit hole as we uncover the hidden meanings and surprising connections woven into these beloved tales.
It's intriguing how Alice's Adventures in Wonderland began as a story told on a boating trip with the real-life Alice Liddell and her sisters. They were with Charles Dodgson, who we know as Lewis Carroll. The story goes that it was a sunny afternoon, and the girls asked for a story.
Yet the weather report for that day actually says it was cloudy with showers. All three sisters remembered sunshine. But the facts tell a different story. It makes you wonder about the role of memory and how easily our perceptions can be shaped.
Perhaps Carroll took some creative liberties for a better story. Another detail that stands out is that Charles Dodgson was known for wearing white trousers. Does that ring a bell from the story?
Now that you mention it, white trousers definitely seem like something a character in Wonderland would wear. It makes you wonder if the story was influenced by Carroll's own life and experiences.
Speaking of intriguing details, one of the things that makes Alice's Adventures in Wonderland so captivating is its appeal to both children and adults. It's often said that adults enjoy it even more.
It's true. I think for adults it evokes a sense of nostalgia, bringing us back to that childhood sense of wonder. But there's also a layer of satire and social commentary that might resonate more with adult readers. It's a book that can be enjoyed on multiple levels.
Exactly. The book is considered subversive because Alice challenges authority figures and isn't punished for it. Remember, this is Victorian England we're talking about. This was pretty groundbreaking for children's literature at the time, which was often very moralistic and focused on obedience.
Alice was a breath of fresh air, questioning everything and everyone she encountered. It's as if Carroll is encouraging children to think critically and not just blindly accept what they're told.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating to consider the context of the 1897 edition of the book, Carroll's final revised version. It seems he wanted to refine and polish his work right up to the end. This edition also includes some extra material, pamphlets and letters addressed to children about religion, which adds another layer to our understanding of Carroll.
Those editions are surprising considering the fantastical nature of his stories. It shows how complex he was as an author. Now let's dive into the book's unique blend of logic and nonsense. It's a world where mathematical equations don't add up. Animals talk, and the impossible becomes possible.
Right from the start, we're thrown into this world, where the rules of logic don't apply. Alice's fall down the rabbit hole is a perfect example. It's a literal and metaphorical descent into absurdity. Could it be that Carroll is reflecting some of the anxieties of his time? The rapid advancements in technology? The shifting social structures, through this fantastical journey.
That's a fascinating thought. And then there's the Pool of Tears, where Alice finds herself swimming with a mouse and other creatures. It's a scene that captures that blend of chaos and whimsy that permeates the entire book.
And then there's that nonsensical caucus race, where everyone runs around in a circle with no clear winner. It's like a commentary on the absurdity of the adult world, with its pointless bureaucracy and rituals, isn't it?
I see it more as a satire of Victorian social rituals, highlighting their meaninglessness. It's as if Carroll is poking fun at the way adults can get so caught up in rules and conventions that they lose sight of what's truly important.
That's a great point. Then there's Alice's constant size changes, growing and shrinking with food and drink. It's a metaphor for the unpredictable nature of growing up and the feeling of being out of control.
Especially those awkward growth spurts and emotional roller coasters of adolescence. It's such a relatable experience even today.
It is. The book is filled with these symbolic moments. Let's consider the Cheshire Cat. His vanishing act could represent the fleeting nature of identity, the way we constantly change and evolve over time.
Or maybe it's about the power of the imagination to shape our reality. After all, the Cheshire Cat appears and disappears at will, as if controlled by Alice's own thoughts.
And who could forget the Mad Hatter's Tea Party? All those nonsensical riddles and wordplay. It's a classic example of how Carroll uses humor to critique social norms.
It's like he's holding up a mirror to society, showing us how absurd our conventions can be.
The Queen of Hearts is another fascinating character, a tyrannical ruler who shouts off with their heads at the slightest provocation.
She represents unchecked power and the abuse of authority, a theme that unfortunately remains relevant even today.
The trial scene where Alice is called to testify. in this chaotic, nonsensical court. Feels like a parody of the legal system. Carroll seems to be suggesting that justice can be arbitrary and far from fair.
It's a sobering thought, but it's presented with such wit and humor that makes you think about these issues in a new way. Now let's step through the looking glass and explore the sequel, Through the Looking Glass and what Alice found there.
It seems that Through the Looking Glass delves even deeper into the playfulness of language. It's as if Carroll is pushing the boundaries even further, exploring the power of language to shape our thoughts and perceptions, and questioning the nature of reality itself.
And we meet a whole new cast of eccentric characters, like the Red Queen and the White Queen. How would you interpret their contrasting personalities?
The Red Queen embodies a world of constant struggle and chaos, while the White Queen represents a more whimsical and illogical reality. Perhaps they represent two different ways of navigating life's challenges.
That's a thought-provoking interpretation. And then there's Tweedledum and Tweedledee, those mischievous twins who constantly mirror and contradict each other.
They're a brilliant representation of duality, always two sides to every coin.
Of course, there's Humpty Dumpty, with his obsession with the meaning of words and how they can be manipulated.
His explanation of portmanteau words, where two meanings are blended into one, is a classic example of Carroll's linguistic creativity.
He actually coined the term portmanteau to describe this.
Carroll was a master of wordplay, and Humpty Dumpty embodies that to the fullest.
And then there's the White Knight, that bumbling inventor, who tries so hard to help Alice.
He's so earnest and well-meaning, even when his inventions go awry.
I see him as a caricature of Carroll himself, with his love of gadgets and his tendency to overthink things.
That's an interesting parallel. He's also a reminder that it's okay to be a little eccentric to embrace the absurdity of life.
Building on the first book, Through the Looking Glass, seems to be a more introspective journey for Alice. It feels like she's not just exploring a fantastical world, but also her own inner world, grappling with questions of identity and the power of language.
Carroll's use of language in Through the Looking Glass is particularly fascinating. He uses it not just for storytelling, but as a tool to explore philosophical ideas.
Remember when Humpty Dumpty declares, "When I use a word, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less."
That statement really challenges the notion that words have fixed meanings, doesn't it? It suggests that language can be subjective and open to interpretation.
Exactly. And if words can have multiple meanings, then how do we truly communicate effectively? How can we be sure we're understanding each other?
That's a question that philosophers have grappled with for centuries. And Carroll, through his playful use of language, makes us consider these complex issues.
It also makes us aware of how language can be used for manipulation, like when the Red Queen constantly changes the rules to suit her own purposes. It's a reminder that language can be used to distort reality and gain power over others.
This seems to tie in with those recurring encounters Alice has with authority figures, both in Wonderland and the Looking Glass world.
It's remarkable that Alice, despite being a child, doesn't just blindly accept what these adults tell her. She questions their logic, challenges their authority, and even points out their hypocrisy.
Could it be that Carroll, through Alice, is encouraging children to think critically even when dealing with adults? Especially in a time when children were expected to be seen and not heard?
It's certainly possible. And that defiance of authority makes Alice such a timeless and relatable character.
But it's also interesting how many of the adult characters in these stories are portrayed as ridiculous or even dangerous, like the Queen of Hearts, with her fondness for beheadings.
Or the Mad Hatter with his chaotic tea party. It makes you wonder if Carroll was subtly suggesting that adulthood isn't all it's cracked up to be. Perhaps he saw something precious in the way children view the world, a sense of wonder that adults often lose.
And maybe he was trying to capture that childlike wonder and curiosity in his stories, which could be why they continue to resonate with readers of all ages.
Speaking of resonating with readers, let's shift our focus to the symbols and motifs that weave through Alice's adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass.
One of the most prominent motifs is that of journeys and transformations.
Alice's journey through these fantastical worlds is a metaphor for life itself. She faces obstacles, meets strange characters, and undergoes significant personal transformations along the way. It does feel like Carroll is saying that life is a constant process of growth and change, and that we should embrace those transformations.
And intertwined with this is the recurring theme of identity.
Yes, Alice constantly questions who she is and where she belongs. She changes size, encounters characters who challenge her very existence, and even forgets her own name.
It's as if Carroll is exploring the fluidity of identity. especially during childhood and adolescence when we're figuring out who we are in the world.
And let's not forget those recurring motifs of games and play.
From the caucus race to the Queen's croquet game, Carroll uses games to highlight the absurdity of rules and the arbitrary nature of power. He also seems to suggest that life itself can be seen as a game with its own winners and losers.
But even when faced with those nonsensical games, Alice retains her sense of wonder and her willingness to play along. It's a reminder that even in a world that often feels chaotic and absurd, we can choose to embrace the unexpected and find joy in the midst of it all.
That's a powerful message, and it speaks to the enduring appeal of these stories. They remind us of the importance of imagination and creativity no matter how old we are.
So true. Now, before we wrap up our deep dive, I think it's essential to consider the man behind these extraordinary tales. Charles Dodgson, the real person behind the pen, named Lewis Carroll. What can we learn about Dodgson that might shed light on his work?
Well, Dodgson was a man of fascinating contradictions. He was a devout Christian who wrote stories brimming with irreverent humor and nonsensical situations. He was a respected mathematician and logician who created worlds where logic is turned upside down.
It's like he lived a double life. We know Dodgson was quite shy and awkward in his personal life. He stammered, preferred the company of children to adults, and never married. But through his writing, he could express his creativity and unique perspective on the world.
It's as if Lewis Carroll was his alter ego, a side of him that could embrace the absurd and challenge societal conventions.
Maybe Wonderland and the Looking-Glass world were reflections of Dodgson's inner world, a place where he could escape the constraints of Victorian society and let his imagination run free.
A place where logic and nonsense could coexist, where children could be wise and adults could be foolish. And it's that sense of possibility, of boundless imagination, that continues to draw readers to Alice's world.
So as we come to the end of our journey down the rabbit hole, what can we take away from this deep dive into Alice's adventures in Wonderland and through the Looking-Glass? What insights can we carry with us?
Perhaps the most important takeaway is the power of embracing the absurd. Carroll's stories teach us to question everything, to challenge assumptions, and to find humor in the unexpected.
They remind us that life doesn't always make sense. And sometimes the best way to navigate its twists and turns is to embrace the nonsense and let our imaginations be our guide.
And never lose that childlike sense of wonder.
Yeah.
Always keep asking questions and be open to new possibilities.
To find the extraordinary in the ordinary and see the world through a different lens, just like Alice.
Lewis Carroll's stories are a gift that keeps on giving, a source of endless entertainment, intellectual stimulation, and inspiration.
They remind us that even in a world that can feel chaotic and absurd, there's always room for a little magic and wonder. We hope this deep dive has inspired you to revisit these timeless tales. Perhaps experience them for the first time. Which character resonated with you most? What hidden meanings did you uncover? What adventures will you create in your own Wonderland? Be sure to pick up your own copy of the book. You can find a link in the episode description. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more explorations into the world's most captivating stories. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep that spark of wonder alive.